this event tonight is led by Donald MacKinnon, who I'm sure many of you know is a crofter. What the funding covers actually is a series of 6 of these online events, but also 8 two-day training events, which we're very excited to get stuck into. And you may have seen on socials and whatnot that we've launched the tickets for the first of those two-day events, which is on Friday the 15th and Saturday the 16th of November in Netherlochaber in Onich. And the idea with these events is there'll be some of these all around the country so that people can go to one in their location, and that they'll be sort of led by crofters in that location, tailored to meet the needs of that location, because obviously different geographies sometimes create different needs in terms of how people are using the land and what they're doing. And the events, the in-person two-day events, are all geared around helping crofters prepare for the changes coming with agricultural policy, looking at how they can make their croft more sustainable economically and environmentally, looking at climate change and how we might have to adapt to changing weather patterns, and covering things like what resources and grants and support are available. So for those of you that have known the SCF for a while, it's quite similar to the access to crofting course that we used to run, but sort of updated to reflect where we are today. So we're really excited to get going with them, and we're just firming up dates for all the other events. But I can tell you that they're going to be, roughly speaking, in Applecross, Skye. There'll be 2 in the Western Isles, 1 in Shetland, 1 in Mull. We've got the one in Lochaber Boot and 1 in Helmsdale. So please do keep an eye out for those coming up. So I will be quiet now, and I will hand over to Donald, who's going to lead you through tonight's session, and we hope you take a lot from it. So Donald, over to you.
Thank you very much for the intro, Donna. As Donna said, I'm a crofter. I'm based in the Isle of Lewis, and I'm an SCF council member. As well as being on the SCF council, I represent SCF on the ARIOB, the snappily titled Agricultural Reform Implementation Oversight Board, and have done for the past 2 and a bit years, I think now. And I'm also representing SCF on the Whole Farm Plan Steering Group, which is relevant for our discussion tonight. We're joined by an expert panel tonight who are going to answer all of your questions, and I'll come to them and introduce them in a minute. But just a wee bit of background to the discussion and why we're here tonight and why we're talking about this subject. So as all of you will be aware, the Scottish Government are in the process of forming a new agricultural policy after our departure from the EU and the Common Agricultural Policy. This necessitated the Scottish Government to come up with their own strategy for how they were going to deliver agricultural support and agricultural payments. So there's lots of different elements to that, lots of different work streams on the go. Lots of changes coming in what is a sequenced process over a number of years. Some of those changes have already come in, and that's one of the ones that we're going to talk about this evening. But you'll probably be familiar with the emergence of this new policy, which is much more focused around objectives around climate and biodiversity and how our agricultural policy relates to those elements, as well as food production and other key objectives too. The new policy is based around 4 tiers, and what's relevant for us tonight is that base tier, the tier 1. But we're interested in the implications for going forward and how that whole policy emerges over the next few years, and SCF's engaging very closely in the development of that, making sure that crofters' voices are heard, making sure that the policy does align with crofting businesses and is scaled and proportionate to those businesses. So we've seen recent announcements around changes to GEEK, particularly around peatlands, which is relevant to crofters. Also changes to the CAF scheme and going into next year's payment year, very important. But focus of tonight is the whole farm plan. And the whole farm plan is really one of the first elements that has actually been brought forward as something that's going to be that all farmers and crofters claiming support are going to have to comply with from next year. So it relates to your base payment, to your eligibility for BPS, and like I said, it applies to all farmers and crofters regardless of the scale of their business. And in its most basic form, it's made up of 5 audits and plans. And to be able to access BPS next year, it is a requirement that you have to have undertaken 2 out of 5 of those plans or audits to the required standard. So just a reminder of what those are. They're the Animal Health and Welfare Plan, the Biodiversity Audit, the Carbon Audit, Soil Analysis, and the Integrated Pest Management Plan. Those are the 5 options that are available. I'm not going to go into them in detail just now in my intro because we've had some really good questions in from everybody before the session tonight, and I think we'll actually get more from just drawing that out of from our individual panelists. So a bit about why we thought it was important to have this session. SEF's been picking up quite a bit of nervousness amongst the crofting community. People finding this perhaps a bit daunting and that they're not quite understanding exactly what's required of them. And we're really keen to make sure that more good, high quality information is available to you as our members and those of you who have joined us for the evening, that you're able to access that. But also because we think that that although yes, this is an additional requirement, we do think that these options that are available, there may be some challenges for completing them, but most businesses, this is achievable for you. And it's probably, I'm going to come to introducing the panel in a minute, and there's a few consultants on the panel, but it is something that that crofters will be able to do themselves without having to engage with a consultant or with a professional. That the bar has been set at a level that should allow people to be able to comply with what's being asked of them themselves. And that's really, really important when we're thinking about crofting businesses with very low levels of support coming in, and that makes it very difficult to justify paying somebody to do a piece of work. That being said, there's also opportunities which I'm sure we'll come to in the discussion, for accessing support through the Preparing for Sustainable Farming funding to get some additional money to pay a consultant to do some of the requirements of the plan. But hopefully after tonight, people will have a better understanding of what the requirements are, but also how you can actually do it yourself, and how you can how you're going to be able to put together your own plans and audits so that you're able to comply with the requirements by 2025. And just finally, it's going to be really important that we get your feedback. So from a session like this, but also how you get on with completing your plans and audits. SEF continues to engage with Scottish Government on the development of these of the whole farm plan, but also on the wider agricultural policy. We're really, really interested in hearing what your thoughts are on it, whether you think things are going to be difficult to comply with, what the barriers might be, so that we can feed that all back into the process and make arguments on your behalf, and make sure that we are getting an agricultural policy that works for crofters. And I think the final thing before I move on to the panel is that we're just talking about the whole farm plan tonight, but that does sit within that wider ag policy reform process, which will potentially include things like changing how payments are calculated, how what is expected of businesses to do beyond just this very basic whole farm plan level, and it's that's something again the SEF's continuing to engage in, and making the case for crofters that that actually we're not necessarily happy with the status quo at the moment. We've got some big asks around where money should go in the system, but that's for other sessions and for other discussions. Although maybe it will come up in the discussion tonight as well. Right, that's enough for me. I'm going to move over to introducing our panel for the evening. So I'll just go through you one by one, and if you can say just a few minutes on kind of who you are, why you're with us tonight, and maybe some initial thoughts on this before we launch into the questions. So I'll start with Siobhan, who's with us from SAC Consulting.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here this evening. I work as an agricultural advisor, and I am here this evening to answer questions on animal health and welfare mostly. That's me.
Thanks, Siobhan. And on to our other guest from SAC Consulting, Willie Budge.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Willie Budge. I'm based up in Thurso with SAC. Do the same job as Siobhan, just not quite as good as Siobhan. And I think Siobhan told me I was hopefully going to cover soil analysis and carbon audits. I think my initial thoughts on the whole farm plan is that it's really good that farmers can do all 5 things themselves. It's good that it's only the applicable things they have to do. And it's good that there's help there available if they need it as well. So I think and all these things are actually probably quite good things to be doing on your croft as well. So that's me.
Thanks, Willie. And on to Iain Carmichael from Scottish Government.
Thanks, Donald. I'm Iain Carmichael. I'm from ARPID in the Scottish Government, based in Edinburgh. And my role was, please don't shoot me, was responsible for the development of this whole farm plan. So I'm here tonight to hopefully dispel some of the worry beads and some of the myths out there that are about how difficult the whole farm plan, how costly it's going to be for you. So hopefully I'm here to alleviate some of your concerns, or all of your concerns, in fact.
Thanks, Iain. And Sue Agnew from Nature Scot.
Good evening. Sorry, I had a few technical problems joining, but we got there in the end. Yes, I'm from Nature Scot. I'm based in Ullapool. I've been working as the project manager developing biodiversity audit through our Farm Biodiversity Scotland tool. And it's great because I think there's quite a few here, having had a look at the name list, who have helped us test this over the summer. We have been developing the biodiversity audit and working very much with Iain as well to look at particularly the habitat types that we are suggesting are mapped as important on farmed and croftland throughout Scotland. And we've then developed the biodiversity audit through our own Farm Biodiversity digital tool to support farmers and crofters in developing their own biodiversity audit, particularly the mapping. So very happy to answer as many questions as I can around that. We have just finished the testing. We had over 200 testers that have been working through that with us, which has been really, really encouraging. Of that, we've had a very, very good number of crofters. We had 68 crofters working on that as well. So we're currently in the stage of gathering all the feedback and looking at some of the changes we need to make it easier to use, to simplify it, to make things clearer for everybody, because it is a tool. The aim is that farmers and crofters can use this tool themselves and create their own biodiversity audit. So that's me, and that's why I'm here this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And last but not least, Rob Black from SCF.
Yes, I'm Rob Black, recently appointed as a board director for the SCF. But I am a consultant as well, part-time. I run my own firm, and I'm a development manager for the Island Community Trust. So I spin a few plates and have a few hats on. Thank
you very much, Rob. Quite a lot of expertise there on the panel, and hopefully going to cover all the different questions that we've had pre-submitted and ones that will come up during the discussion. So my plan is that we're going to work our way through the pre-submitted questions, and I won't ask every panelist to answer every question, but if you want to jump in and I haven't come to you, then stick your hand up. And we'll try and get through the pre-submitted questions, but if people in the joining us have any very specific points to make about our response or a supplementary for one of the questions that's been raised, then do please raise your hand. But if it's an unrelated question, then we'll hopefully have some time for, well, we will have some time for other questions and discussion at the end. So hopefully that's clear. Right, so I'm going to kick off with a question on carbon audits. And we've probably already touched a wee bit on this already. So it has been suggested that it is possible for crofters to complete the carbon audit by themselves using the AgriCalc tool. On the AgriCalc site, it says that the recommendations required can be those that the tool generates. Is it possible to confirm that this is the case, or do crofters need to pay a consultant to carry out the audit? I'll come to Iain Carmichael first, and then I'll ask Willie to say a bit about that as well.
Thanks, Donald, and it's a really good question. So, no, you don't have to pay. Sorry, Willie, Siobhan, and Rob. You don't need to pay a consultant to carry out your carbon audit. You can pick any of the freely available tools that are out there, carbon calculating tools, as long as they're PAS 2050 standard. So the only reason you'd maybe pay to have an agent or somebody to look at it would be to give you tailored recommendations. But you can, AgriCalc, for example, will give you generic examples or generic recommendations. But what you could also do is, you could look at the free-to-use resources such as the FAS website. There's a lot of good advice on there and recommendations that you'll find in there, or even attending seminars such as this, where you can peer-to-peer learning or different specialised events that may be relating to carbon audits. But certainly you don't need to pay for a carbon audit to be prepared if you are comfortable to carry out one yourself using one of the tools that are out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Iain. We do have another question that's around it's specifically asking who can you use to as a carbon audit advisor in Lewis, but maybe broaden this out to other areas as well. And asking the question, will this cost more than the £500 grant that's available? Is the refund of the cost of a carbon audit a definite payment through rural payments, or is there a limit to how many grants they will issue? Just Iain, maybe if you could just come back specifically on the PSF side of that, and then I'll come to Willie Budge on.
So the funding for PSF through Preparing for Sustainable Farming is guaranteed until the end of this year. We don't know, just because of our budgets, we don't know what the funding will be, if there'll be funding available in 2025 or beyond. So certainly the funding is definitely guaranteed until the end of this year. So you can apply if you get an agent to carry out a carbon audit. The funding will be there for carbon audits and soil analysis till the end of the year at least.
Thanks, Iain. And coming to you, Willie, just sort of in relation to both of these questions that we've had. So around the tool and doing it yourself, but also the funding that's available and what services are available to people to have a consultant help you with this.
Yeah, I think Iain's obviously covered your questions very well, but I think I would maybe touch on the fact of like what it's like for a crofter to do their own one. So it's probably quite daunting to think a carbon audit, but actually when you get into it, you're really just putting in your information, all your own information, no financials, all inputs, outputs in a volume related. So it'd be your number of hectares of permanent grass, number of hectares of hay, your fertilizers, if you use fertilizers, sprays, if you use sprays, your livestock numbers over a year. So it's a 12-month period you pick yourself. So you're looking at your ins and outs in terms of your livestock. All information you're going to have at hand, you just need to spend a wee bit of time to dig it out. So yeah, land and crops is first section, second section livestock, and third section is fuel and renewables. So electricity that you've used in your shed for your lambing, your diesel, your petrol, any renewables you've got in waste. So I can only speak about AgriCalc because that's obviously what I use, but I do think it is a good system to use. You're following through each screen. Some screens won't affect you at all. So maybe if you don't use fertilizer, you don't grow crops, you won't be spraying. So I think for certainly maybe even smaller crops, you could probably input your data pretty quickly. And as Iain said, then at the end, you've got mitigations automatically for you, which would cover you for your whole farm plan element. And that's your carbon audit actually done for 5 years for your carbon audit at the moment, as the rules are standing. I think the other side for funding would, if you did want to go for funding, preparing for sustainable farming, you've got your £500 for your carbon audit. You've got your £250 development if you do a soil sample as well. So a £250 development is for you to read up on soils and fertilizers in your own time. So in theory, it's actually £750 funding you'd be getting, plus you get actual costs for any soil analysis you did. There's also farm advisory service, although it's temporarily suspended just now, so it potentially may open again in 2025. We don't know. So if we're preparing for sustainable farming stops at the end of 2024, potentially a farm advisory specialist plans for carbon audits may reopen again, and it's £660 funding. So as I said at the very start, there's help available, but certainly I think most folk could certainly do their carbon audit themselves. And it is really just like a scales. It's what's gone in over a 12-month period and what's gone out. So, and the other thing would be you could sign up for free and have a go at it. And if you don't like it, you don't think you can manage it, then you can go for help. But I certainly think that you could have a go at yourself at doing a carbon audit.
Thanks for that, Willie. The next question I'm going to split into two. So I'll just read it out in its entirety and then I'll split it up. So how effective is the whole farm plan with crofts rather than larger farms? And then the question goes on to ask, will measures be forced on crofters to commit to costly farm plans based on the results of the personal audit? And with that second part of the question, I was going to come to Iain Carmichael and give some clarity around that on whether the results of the audit will crofters be asked to do something with that.
Yeah, so the audits and plans are for your use and for the benefit of your business, your croft. The aim is that the information you get from these audits and plans, and what I would say is if you take ownership of them, if you actually undertake them yourself, you'll understand what's been in them. It'll help you either, hopefully reduce any emissions, make you more efficient, and hopefully identify new funding that you can access through the new agriculture reform programme. So it'll nothing within what you do in your audit plans, that information is yours. It won't be forced, or you won't be forced to change anything because of the outcomes or what the content of those audits and plans. The information is for you to use to strengthen your business and move forward and hopefully make better use of the future support framework when it comes out.
And at the moment, will the Scottish Government be looking to even have access to any of that information? That's not being collated at the moment. So the only information we're gathering at the moment is the biodiversity. So what we want to do is create that picture. Yeah. We all hear of the impact farms and crofters are having on biodiversity. And what we don't have is that picture to understand, where is the biodiversity in Scotland? What's the spread of it? So we are gathering that information initially. We may start to gather some of the other information. So likes of, the carbon footprints. We know agriculture and crofting is blamed for a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions, and we're looking to target or needing to reduce them. We may in the future start to gather some of that information on your carbon audits, what your carbon footprints are, etc. But we would not be gathering, or it's not foreseen to be gathering the outcomes or the recommendations or what actions you intend to take as a result of these. Thanks, Iain. Just coming back to the first part of that question, then, how effective is the whole farm plan with crofts rather than larger farms? And just thinking specifically about the carbon audits there, because that was the second part of the question, and I think that's probably what the were referring to. Rob, you've been involved in a few carbon audits for crofting businesses. How have you found them, and how do they relate well to the scale of crofting in terms of what they show the business?
It's a bit of a mixed, I think there's a bit of a mixed element because crofting's quite diverse. There's various degrees, sizes of croft and various activities. It depends on what's sort of happening. We've had instances where carbon audits where it's, you know, two enterprises, maybe a beef and a sheep, and the scales of economy have kind of conflated that makes it look worse than it actually is by comparison of other similar sized farms or upland areas. And it can be a bit daunting when you get that big number, that big carbon value at the end. And some of it as well has been a panic from certainly a few of the clients that we've had, where they've wondered, well, they can't deliver on any of the recommendations that they have been presented because they feel that they don't have the capital, they don't have the scope, they don't have the land. But it's actually, as a process to go through, it does help. I think in most cases it's helping people understand exactly where they are. There's probably work to be done. I think certainly there's work to be done in being able to compare crofters with crofters rather than incorporate maybe larger farms or areas that are different in terms of geology and topography and things like that as well. But these are, as we go through this and the more we do it, the more these things sort of highlight and the better the scheme will get or the better the process will get. But it does give that sort of foundation bench line and being able to help crofters identify maybe the things in principle, what they're maybe needing to consider, you know, if their fertilizer use is maybe just a bit much for what they're actually producing, or maybe they need to, if there are mechanisms or ways to improve their efficiencies, things like that. It gives information, and that helps drive decision making. Certainly, the only argument I've got is that sometimes the values that come out of the carbon audit at this stage certainly can feel, for a croft, in cases of crofters that we've looked at, they can feel a bit more daunting, or when they're compared to other areas, it looks worse than it actually is, or that they look like their options are less or more limited than maybe some other areas as well. So it's been able to navigate that, and that's where the advisor comes in. If you're going through that element, they can help just alleviate that stress a little bit when you do your own and you go, well, what am I looking at here? What does this mean? Somebody's just there to help navigate that a little bit and put your mind at ease.
Thanks, Rob. Willie, Siobhan, do you have anything to add to that in terms of your experiences of what you've actually seen in terms of the outputs from carbon audits on crofts, and have you seen them being useful to the crofting businesses?
Yeah, I would say they have in most cases. I can see where Rob's coming from as well in some cases, but I think in general, you're really looking at an efficiency tool. So whether you've got 10 ewes or 1,000 ewes, if you can make even a small improvement, it's going to help. Or, you know, if you've 3 cows compared to 1,000 cows or 100 cows, if you know what I mean. So I think there's always that benefit of looking at your figures. You know, because I've found quite a few folk have actually even looking at their fuel usage. Once they've counted up for a 12-month period, they've been quite shocked at what they've used, if you know what I mean, or feed or whatever it might be. So I think it's a good exercise for you to do for your own good. Never mind actually when you go on and put it onto the system as well. So I think for bigger places, bigger farms, smaller crofts, bigger crofts, I think there's an element that could help you for all sizes, I would say. Yeah.
And Siobhan, anything to add to that? And maybe thinking about the tool that's available as well in AgriCalc, you know, is the tool the best tool that's there for these smaller producers to use, or is it kind of like Willie was saying, well, it doesn't matter what scale you're operating at, it's still gonna reveal these kind of inefficiencies that maybe exist within your business?
Well, I think when you use any of the tools, they give you a comparison against the average. So you can look at a comparison against your type of business or your size of business or your enterprises. And so immediately you can see whether you're good, bad, or indifferent. And then, as Rob was saying, if you want to go further and look into why, then it gives you a good starting point, because you can see what other folk are doing. It's a bit like the old, well, QMS used to provide figures on herd averages and flock averages and what folk were doing, and you could see there whether you were really terrible in comparison or whether you were the absolute top. So these things are useful in that sense. So, and all the carbon calculators, you know, they're all trying to do the same job. So I would just go to whichever one you felt comfortable with.
Thanks, Ron. Iain, did you want to come in there?
I think it was just a quick one to say on the the comparison side. I'm sure I've seen statistics just now that the smaller farm and small croft have been the least engaged in carbon audit or undertaking carbon audit. So as we progress through this, we could get to, by 2028, 17,000 farmers and crofters across Scotland having a carbon audit. So of course, more smaller producers are going to undertake carbon audits, and the comparison, the statistics or the numbers will be there to change that. So you're not comparing apples with pears. You'll be hopefully comparing with like-minded or like-sized businesses going forward. I think that's what I would say is the kind of key.
Moving on from carbon audits to some questions on the animal health and welfare plan. And this is quite a detailed one with a specific example. I live in Fair Isle, which is the most remote inhabited isle in the UK. We have no vet or SQP in the isle, and vets do not come out to the isle, although they will do phone consultations and send meds in by plane when required. It is also not practicable or financially viable to ship individual animals to mainland Shetland to see a vet. In the animal health and welfare plan, in the guidance, it says that we're expected to confirm annually that a vet has been on the holding in the past 12 months. I'm keen to undertake the animal health and welfare plan in my whole farm plan, but I don't know how we crofters here can comply with the vet visit requirement. I would be very grateful for any suggestions on what we could do so we're meeting all the criteria. So Fair Isle is probably quite an extreme example, but it certainly won't be unique throughout the Highlands and Islands. There will be other circumstances where vets don't regularly visit, particularly sheep flocks across the crofting counties. So there will be other instances of this, and it's certainly something that's been brought to SCF's attention in the past as well. I'll come back to Iain first, just on the kind of thinking behind including the vet visit in the guidance, and any thinking on how that in that specific situation it would be dealt with.
Yeah, so the thinking behind it was, we think it's good practice for any livestock keeper to have some form of vet involvement in their the management or rearing of their animals. So what we tried to do was look at all the practicalities across Scotland in the farm and crofting scenarios, and try and introduce as much flexibility as we could with the start. What we, for the crofting areas in the Highlands especially, we've got that veterinary involvement down to, a vet being present in a township, which I know in the Fair Isle situation is not probably going to be relevant, or a vet present at, a gathering point, which could be, the health bank or even the market or whatever, where they've looked at livestock in the last 12 months. I think what, in certain circumstances, what we could be looking at is that whole veterinary involvement, whether that could, in the most remote areas, be having, evidence of that, having sought advice from a vet, i.e. telephone consultation, etc. So I think it's something we'll take away and look at, along with yourself, Donald, just to look at. I know we spoke briefly about them on Monday, the animal health and welfare stuff, so we'll look at it, but I think we can certainly have some dispensation, or our local ARPID offices have some dispensation where we know locally there is no access or real access to a vet. And
I think that's the key difference there, isn't it? That there is a difference between a flock being in the care of a veterinary surgeon and having an annual visit from a vet. And as long as that flock, that crofter has a relationship with a veterinary practice and they know what they're doing on their croft, they're able to speak to them on the phone. There must be a way that can be worked into the guidance, I think, to get around this particular one.
Definitely, yeah. It's that whole thing of having access to a vet. I think that's the key.
Yeah. We've got another couple of questions related to the animal health and welfare plan. People asking for SCF to provide possibly a further workshop looking more in depth at how we put together animal health and welfare plans, and also asking about whether SCF could provide a template for people to complete themselves. So if I could come to you, Siobhan, not to pick up on what SCF should do in the future, but thinking about what tools and resources are available to people at the moment that would support them in the creation of an animal health and welfare plan, and what your experience of it has been so far.
So for many crofters that we've spoken to, if they're already in QMS, then they'll have an animal health and welfare plan, which counts for the whole farm plan. So if you're in QMS and you're doing a QMS animal health plan, then you're sorted. You're 50% of the way there with your whole farm plan for next year. So that's of comfort to quite a lot of people. Even if you have an old QMS plan, you can update it yourself and just make sure that it's up to date. So the only thing that you need to do, as you were saying, is have a vet visit at some point. So for most people, they'll be able to drop their own plan, because you're really just looking at putting down some facts and figures, and then putting down the disease risk and what you might do about it. And then something that maybe you wouldn't think about is putting in things like a euthanasia policy and what you do with dead stock. So it's not too onerous, and there are templates out there that can help. So you can download the QMS template for free without being a member. And also there's the SAPS template as well. So you can sign up to SAPS. I'll put a link in the chat. You can sign up to SAPS, and that will take you through doing a template too. So it's not maybe as onerous as people are thinking, because they can update it themselves. Obviously, having your vet involvement is going to make sure that you get the most out of it. And it's, I think you don't want to look at this as a tick box exercise. I think if you're going to do it, then do it properly. Draw it up yourself and then maybe go over it with your vet. That would help. Coming back to the fair isle, and maybe this is a question for Iain, I was wondering whether something like a video consultation with a vet would work, because the vets are going to come across the same problem, because they can't prescribe antibiotics unless they've seen an animal. They couldn't do a vet attestation form. So it's going to be an issue for other things apart from the whole farm plan.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what I'm saying. We'll have to take away and work up on it more with SCF and other stakeholders to try and get it right. But I'm thinking, I think the video or telephone, like I'm thinking of Flying Doctors in Australia, but something similar to that is, we have to look at practicalities and use that local discretion within our ARPID offices to determine where that is a required approach.
Can I but there was a question just popped up in the chat there. It might not seem, somebody's asking, what does SAPS stand for?
Oh, I knew somebody would ask that. What is it? Scottish Animal Health
Planning
System. Thank you.
There we go. Team effort. We got that. Okay, our next question's on the integrated pest management plans. The Scottish Government writes the following: IPM plans are applicable to any business, regardless of size, that uses plant protection products, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, slug control agents, and plant growth regulators. We currently don't use any plant protection products, but we'll have to do a pest management plan, a pest management as well. Is there anywhere that we can be given a short introduction or demo of the available tools? Could a further online workshop be an opportunity to do this? So I'm sort of assuming the answer here is that if you're not carrying out any of those activities, then an integrated pest management plan isn't for you, and there wouldn't be a requirement there for you to complete one. But Iain, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah. So that was, I suppose that's one of the myths. So as you know, there's five audits and plans, but not all of them will be applicable to everybody. So, like if you don't have animals, you don't do an animal health and welfare plan. If you don't use plant protection products, you don't need to do an integrated pest management plan. You can do one if you want, because there's maybe some useful information you get out of it, but you don't have to do them. Soil analysis, if you've got region 1 land and don't spread artificial fertilizers, dung, you don't need to do one. If you spread seaweed, you still don't need to do one, because it's not a farm manure and it's not an artificial fertilizer. So we're getting there. The mandatory ones will be carbon audit. Everyone will need to do a carbon audit. If you've got permanent land, which unless you only seasonally let your crofts, you'll have to do your biodiversity audit, and the other ones may be optional. So maybe for some people that don't have maybe 2 or 3 will be the maximum that everyone may need to do. They may not need to do some of the other ones.
Kind of on that basis, then integrated pest management plans aren't going to be relevant for very many crofters, but just because I don't think we have any more questions on this, can I just open it out to if anybody did have any further questions, or any of the panelists would like to comment on the integrated pest management plan option, and we can cover that off just now. Willie, did you want to come in on that?
Just to say that if you do have to do it, you're probably looking at 20 minutes online to complete it. It's if it's something you do have to do, it's probably the easiest one to do, probably.
Yeah.
I would say. But on the other hand, a lot of people won't have to do it anyway, so it's one less thing to do. Yeah.
And also to note that when you go on the website, there are 2 options. One's for grassland only. So if you're a grassland only producer, I think when I did mine, it took me 7 minutes. So it is pretty simple. It's not asking you anything particularly technical. It's just simply asking you your attitude really towards plant protection. But if you were even using Roundup or something like that, then it would be one to do.
Thanks for that, Siobhan. Any other questions on the integrated pest management plan? It's been pointed out the guidelines say 5 by 2028. So as Iain's sort of been explaining there, it's 5 relevant plans and audits by 2028. They won't all be relevant or applicable to every business. But maybe there's something there in how that's being phrased and communicated, Iain, to be
certainly. So I think I'll go through the guidance again and make sure that it's more explicit to say relevant plans. The maximum's 5, but only you need to undertake the ones that are relevant to your farm or crop business. So yeah, thanks for that. Now
we're moving on to biodiversity audit. A question related to the app just now, but also on to other methods. So although NatureScott is confident that the app will be ready to use early next year, there are people that might like to carry out their biodiversity audit before that time, or will struggle to use an app, for example, due to poor connectivity. One alternative option is to use the online land mapping system. The system is not very user-friendly, and a short introduction or demo of the online habitats editor would be very useful. Likewise, a demonstration of how to carry out the biodiversity audit using a paper map. Is this something that can be arranged? If I could come to Sue first to talk a wee bit about the app and where it's up to, what its capabilities are, and then maybe I'll come to Iain to talk about other ways to do the biodiversity audit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Just to make this clear, it's not just an app that needs to be done out in the field on your phone. It's also a website, so it's a web-based application. So anybody who has a computer can and will be able to go on and use it on their computer to do the mapping. And in fact, hopefully those that were actually testing with us over this last period will have found that quite easy to do. You all know your crofts, you all know what the land is that's there, and you're provided with a map of your fields, and it's a matter of then just applying a habitat type to each of the fields and adding in the boundaries such as hedges. So as long as you've got Wi-Fi connectivity in the house, you can actually do that around your kitchen table or in your office. That's something just to make that clear. So connectivity in the field isn't something to worry about for the basic mapping side. I'll just quickly talk a little bit about a paper option as well. When we set up the testing, the digital testing, we were asked to set up a paper-based version as well, but actually nobody came forward to request that. So we've not tested it, but we do have guidance that we can provide on how to create a paper-based map. It is just guidance, it's not been tested, but it is something that might be useful to get folks started to have a look at that. And then it would have normally come back to us and we would have uploaded it onto Farm BioScot. But this could be done as a paper map that could then go back to the land mapping team. And I think that's something we'll maybe need to just tidy up and put out there and make that available and see if that is helpful for folks to have a look at. So that was all I was going to say on that, Donald, if that's all right.
Perfect, thanks, Sue. And Iain.
Thanks, Donald. Yeah, so we're just currently in the process of drafting up some simple or practical guidance on how to complete your biodiversity audit / habitat map that doesn't involve the use of NatureScot's app. Either the way, I suppose, as a sneak preview, there'll be the option to, if you only want to identify a single habitat within each field that you've got, you can provide a list of your field numbers and the habitat that's in each field. We'll provide examples of how to start to basically create your biodiversity audit by listing your fields, having a think about what you actually use them for at the moment, and then looking at the habitat descriptions or the habitat names and habitat descriptions, and or match them up to what you actually the fields is used for to start to build that basic habitat map. So hopefully that'll be published later this month. Once Donald says it's okay. No, we've shared it with our whole farm plan working group. So, and we're just looking for comments on it before we roll it out. But certainly that, and potentially we could look to see if we can get some demonstrations on how to use the Lipis tool itself, if that would be something people would like.
Involved in some of the testing of the app, and I've had a go on the Lipis tool as well, and I think that there is definitely some, certainly using the app was very intuitive, very easy to do, and as Sue was saying, it's the kind of thing that when you know the ground, there is no requirement for you to be out there assessing the habitat as such, although it does give you the tools to do some more of that and to do some more actually assessing what that condition that habitat is, which will be something that will be useful in the future. But that actually just recording what your habitats are, probably everybody on this call would be fairly comfortable with doing that right now if it was put in front of you. Similar to the Lipis tool, I think, as the questioner kind of said, there's just a wee bit more to make sure you're in the right place. But then once you are in the right place, the tools are there, and it's going to be usable for I think most system users.
It's probably the best in terms of range, from getting it on an app on your phone to doing it on rural payments, all the way down to getting some pens and colouring it in yourself. So I think hopefully it sort of suits everyone, and there is actually, you can get a biodiversity specialist plan, funding under Farm Advisory Service for it if for some reason you don't want to use the app, you don't want to go on rural payments, you don't want to get crayons and colour in your map yourself, sort of thing. So there's a whole range of ways of doing it yourself, and there's also help available if need be. But again, I think it's, as we've said about all the other things, it's something that you can easily do yourself, and there's all ranges of, if you're a technophobe or if you're well into it, you've got all the range of options to carry out a biodiversity audit, and it also, once you've done it, that's you covered for 5 years as well.
Questions on kind of when the app might be available and barriers to that. Iain's turned off his camera, but Sue.
I haven't managed to run away. Yeah, as I said, the period of testing, we've gathered a huge amount of data and an awful lot of feedback, which has been fantastic, because really it's the feedback from all the farmers and crofters that have been testing it that will allow us to make the changes we need to. We're going through that at the moment. It only finished on the 14th of October. So we're now going through all that feedback and we're prioritising what we need to do to make sure we can launch Farm Biodiversity Scotland tool, the app and the website, back out there for everybody to be able to access. It's a Nature Scott owned app and website, so it's something that is available for everybody to access free of charge. There's no charge to accessing it, and we've just got a lot of bits and pieces we need to adapt, mend, put in place, take on board, but early 2025 is where we're aiming for. We've got Christmas in the middle of that, we know. We're very, very aware of the SAF deadline in May. So we are really pulling out as many of the stops as we can. And as soon as we have something, we'll be able to put out more formally or officially, rather than just saying early 2025, then we will. But we want to be confident that we'll have everything in place so as it works. And we don't have just frustrated customers who are trying to do the habitat mapping and it's not working properly. So we need to get that absolutely nailed. We're not far off. It's just pulling it all together after the testing.
Thanks, Sue. And Iain, anything to add on that, just in terms of how that's aligning with Scottish Government development?
We'll have the alternatives as well, as the app. So I think that's, as, in the meantime, the testing phase is over. We're going to roll out some guidance to how you can do it yourselves on another platform, either for the technophobes with the good old pen and paper, if you can remember how to write, or some, using the Lippis itself. So I think there'll be alternative approaches regardless of if the app's, hopefully widely available early 2025.
There's a question there in the chat. Can you share the link to the Lippis tool? So you can access that through your rural payments account. So if you know how to get onto that, that's the best way to get soil analysis next. So we've got 3 questions on this that I think I'll just group together because they're quite related to one another. So it's a question asking, will there be a requirement to provide sample reports from all Region 1 fields for the 2025 SAF application? Can you confirm that the basic SAC soil analysis is acceptable and that our organic matter analysis is not required? And if reports for all fields are submitted with the 2025 SAF, is the soil sampling option covered for 5 years thereafter? No,
you'll not need to submit any of the records with your SAF next year. What you'll need to do is just confirm your SAF by completing a tick box to say, tell us which of the 5 audits and plans you've carried out and when they were carried out. What you would be required if you were selected for an inspection from next year, the inspector may ask to see evidence that you've got your soil analysis. So they won't be carrying out assessment of the content of the soil analysis, but they'll just be looking for evidence that it is there. And I'll probably just, if that's okay, Don, just pick up on the last question or the last point about if you did all your regional inland now. So if you did it, all in 2024, then it's, that's a good for 5 years basically. So that's you covered for 5 years. So you probably wouldn't need to do soil sampling again for the whole farm plan requirements until probably autumn 2029 or spring 2030. However, Willie and Siobhan or Rob will probably say that a good practice would be to undertake soil analysis when you make significant changes in cropping or nutrients. So I'll leave it to the technical experts for that.
SEC soil analysis, is it acceptable? So it would be, I think anyone that you put your soils into now would be acceptable as far as I can gather. I know anyone locally up here, our competitors, they're all doing soil analysis that's acceptable. I think in terms of 5 years, we touched on PSF before, and it could be an opportunity if you come under the fact that you use fertilizers or farmyard manure, that you could use PSF to do your soil analysis before the end of December this year and get paid for it. You may want to do, if you had 5 fields, you may want to do 1 field each year, because maybe that's the field you're going to reseed each year. So you might want to just do 1 each year over 5 years to 2028. But there is an option where you could get funding for under actual costs for your soil analysis to cover you for whole farm plan if it's applicable to your croft.
Can I just add to that? There was a question there about organic matter, and that's in a routine analysis. So the routine soil analysis that most of the labs will do, that includes organic matter now. So you don't need to worry about doing a separate test. So if you just ask for routine, and that covers phosphate, potash, and pH, and it'll give you organic matter and calcium ratios. That's usually roundabout. It's probably the cheapest test that most will do.
A point here, a croft attracting BPS by 2028 will attract a relatively modest payment, and is there any indication that this will exceed the costs of future audits? And then similarly, an example of a claim here, which I think is quite useful to just read out. So my own croft is 7 hectares, 17 acres, which we claim for, and we only have region 2 and 3 land, plus a share in the common grazings. We have breeding sheep. We receive less than £300 from farm payments each year, excluding LFAS. The whole farm plan is requiring me to spend more than I receive each year, albeit with the possibility of claiming back some of the mandatory tests, etc. Financially, I should no longer claim and be part of the scheme. Thoughts? So, before I bring in the panelists, just wanted to say a wee bit on this, that I think this goes back to kind of what I was saying in the intro at the start of the meeting, is that we're talking about the whole farm plan just now. We're talking about these additional requirements that are going to be required for 2025. But this is all happening in the context of agricultural policy reform and major change to that whole system, where anomalies like that, like somebody who's actively crofting over their 7 hectare croft with breeding sheep, and they're only managing to attract a payment of £300. That's not a meaningful amount of money to keep them in the system, especially when Iain and his colleagues at Scottish Government are going to be asking those crofters to do more to receive that payment. And while when I bring Iain in, I'm sure he'll tell us that what we've discussed through this session today is that the requirements of the whole farm plan will be achievable for that crofter. We are starting to build extra requirements onto that business, on top of what they've been doing for however many years they've been crofting. And there will be crofters, some on this call, right across the crofting counties, who will be asking themselves that same question of whether they should carry on claiming, whether it's worth their while to carry on meeting the requirements. And hopefully what you've got from this session tonight is that these the requirements, certainly of the whole farm plan, the answer to that question is yes, you should be able to meet these requirements, should be able to achieve it. But in the long term, and my view and SCF's view is that we need to see wider reform happening here that makes it more worthwhile for businesses like that to be participating in the system. And that in order to do that, we're going to need to see changes to how payments are calculated and how we're actually dealing with these businesses and making it worth their while. And on the back of that as well, we've also got to remember that even if crofters are able to do the elements of the plan themselves, and they're able to sit down and do their animal health and welfare plan, sit down and use the NatureScot app, or use their another method to do the biodiversity auditing, that is taking up their time. And crofters' time is valuable. People have other jobs. They've got plenty other things to do on the croft, and that's got to be fed into it as well. Anyway, I've gone on a wee bit of a rant there, but going back to the actual question, and responding to whether it's worth their while still doing it. I'll come to Iain first, and then if any of the other panelists would like to comment on that before we open it up to just wider questions from the floor. Thanks.
Thanks, Donald. So it's very difficult. So that's that is a personal choice whether you make that decision, and I understand. We understand. Just echo the comments you were making, Donald, about all the things you've been doing for all the years, and now been asked to do these extra tasks. But what I hope we've demonstrated tonight is that the whole farm plan, yes, it will cost you time, your time, but it won't. You should be able to do it yourself without actually costing you money, and to allow you to continue to claim support. And we don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't have any inside information on where the future support, future base payment, future LFAS is going to be, and what the future may hold for small and large farmers and crofters, and that's an unfortunate position. And I wish I could give you some reassurance of things are going to be better in the future, but at this stage, unfortunately, I can't. But we are listening. SCF are definitely engaged. We're hearing what SCF are saying. I think hopefully you can see the evidence through what the requirements of the whole farm plan. We've tried to make it as flexible as possible, taking account of the crofting situation, the smaller producer situation, to avoid that additional cost to access what is relatively smaller payments. So thank you.
Thanks, Iain. Any comments from our other panelists in relation to that sort of balance for smaller producers? Rob?
Yeah, I think just to sort of highlight, I think cost has definitely been the biggest concern or the most prevalent question. And the answer to that, yes, there is if you do it yourself, there is a cost to your time. But Willie and Siobhan have touched on it as well. The answer to that is, there is assistance through the Farm Advisory Service for specialist plans. Now, the specialist plans, they're probably overkill, or they're definitely overkill in terms of the level of detail that they will produce compared to what the whole farm plan requires. But there's an opportunity there. Willie said it right at the beginning that these tasks, these tools are going to be useful. They're going to be relevant to help businesses understand the position that they're in, where their efficiencies are, where their inefficiencies are, what their land is like, what their soil, animal health, all of that sort of stuff. And if there's areas of interest, the specialist plans will help navigate the time element that you're basically employing somebody else to manage that time that you can then be best, doing the work and making the decisions and things like that on the croft. But it also is support that you really shouldn't be having to spend any money on the whole farm plan. So for the example of somebody that's only getting £300 basic payment and then their LFAS, these plans can help mitigate that and take the headache away while the funding's there. The funding's there till 2027. It's a tool that's available. I would be of the mind that if paperwork's not your thing, or you want maybe just, if it's an area of interest and you want maybe a bit more in-depth that might help answer questions that follow in 2026 and up till 2028 and beyond, that might be the avenue to go down. If you don't want to do it yourself, that would be, I think that's something that's available that just mitigates the cost and the headache, I think.
Any more comments, Willie?
I would look at it a different way. I have got sheep and cattle, but I don't have any claim. I just rent ground, so I've got no subsidy coming in. So in this example, I would say if you look at 25 to 28, this chap is going to get £1,200, and I'm assuming he doesn't use sprays, so he doesn't have Region 1 land, so he only has to do three things. He could do his carbon audit himself. He could do his biodiversity audit quite quickly as well. And that would be him covered for 5 years. He would have his animal health plan to make up himself as well. But so in my head, I would think £1,200 is not bad for spending a wee bit of time. I know it might be someone that doesn't want to do it themselves. I agree. And as Rob said, there is help there, but someone that could do it themselves, it's probably not bad getting £1,200.
Actually, this has been very, very helpful, because I've been stressed out about all of this since it ever came to me that this is going to happen. I'm a member of the QMS and I've got a vet health plan in place. Does that cover me for the animal health and welfare plan already?
Yes.
Yes, so I don't need to do anything else as long as I'm covered with that. I don't use any fertilizers, weed killer or anything at all. So I don't need to do the pest management plan either?
No.
No.
No. So that's two things I've already done. So that's fine. My next one is going to be the carbon audit. And as Willie's been saying, we should all manage it ourselves. So I'm going to have a go, Willie. So it better be easy.
Thank you, Christine. What if you're not in QMS? The QMS template is basically an empty document.
The QMS template, unless of course I put the wrong link in, the QMS template does take you through animal health and welfare plans. So you'd have to complete it yourself, or you could complete it with your vet. But it gives you all the headings that you need. So you can use that to put in details of your livestock, lambing figures, calving figures, disease risks, etc.
But that does map across to the requirements that are in the whole farm plan guidance. There isn't anything that's missing there. Or Iain, do you want to?
No, there's not. That's right. It's exactly just what Siobhan said. It's it's equivalent. And the other thing to say is the Farm Advisory Service website will give you. I think there's a section on there on animal health and welfare planning as well. So there's that tool there to get some help and advice on how to complete it.
This is more a comment than a question, but I guess it maybe just highlights some of the things that people are wrestling with in relation to the carbon audit. So we were doing a series of road shows recently, and spoke to a very lovely lady up in Durness who was a grazings clerk. And she said that she had quite a few people around the table had a go at doing the carbon audit, but one of the things that she flagged up was just that in terms of thinking about the scale, she said she got to a question in the carbon audit that asked about the average weight of your animals, and she said, I sat and looked at it and I thought, well, I've got one cow and one calf, so what the hell do I put? So I think, but that's maybe a demonstration of like some of the things that people are wrestling with in terms of they don't have big flocks or big herds, and so it's just kind of trying to keep that context right and know how to deal with that. So whether that's something else that can be maybe flagged up in guidance and things, just maybe what we need is some more specific examples to really help people understand in their scale of things what are they putting in for these sorts of questions and how would they answer that. So yeah, I just thought it was quite a nice example of something that somebody had wrestled with.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of average weights, it would be at the very start, you actually see what animals you have. So you would have cows, and you'd have if you've only got one cow, then like summary carbon audit, if you don't have a weight rate, obviously you're just going to have to estimate to your best of your abilities what weight you think your cow is. So if you've got one cow, you're actually far easier to probably get an average weight because you're only looking at her and guessing what weight she is. So that's the same way all the different, if for sheep, you'd have ewes, skimmers, ewe hogs, lambs. So again, you're going on average weights. And, some things in the carbon audit can be exact. So if you've sold 2 wean calves to a mart, you'll have your mart slip and it'll say they were 275 kilos each. If you sell store lambs, you're obviously just going to have to try and estimate roughly what weight they were. So, some way carbon audit, you're putting your best guess in, and some things you can have exactly, like if you bought in 2 ton of sheep nuts, then obviously you know exactly what you've bought in. So some things can be a best estimate and some would be exact from invoices, etc.
Willie, coming back to you, there was a question there about the £1,200 that you mentioned. Can you just explain that?
Sorry, I was looking at the example that you give for the guy that's getting £300 a year. So over 4 years, 25 to 28, he would be getting £1,200. So I thought it might be worth his while to do the thing. Sorry, I should have
with you
clearer. Sorry.
Thanks. Ruth, you've got your hand up there.
Hi there. I just wanted to check. I did a soil analysis this year, and I have got a new vet, so had a farm visit, and she's done a animal health plan. Is that me covered? And then in the next 5 years, I can continue and do the carbon audit or something else. Am I covered? It's because I've done them this year. Do they cover me for next year?
so I'll bring others in, but if the soil analysis meets the criteria of the guidance and you have that animal health and welfare plan from the vet that again meets the guidance, then yes, that sounds like you're covered. But Iain?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is on your animal health and welfare plan, just ensure that it's under 12 months old come the 15th of May 2025. So that's the only one that, or not the only one, but it needs the annual vet visit or the annual update. So it's, yeah, so you've got it in place now, and you know, come, if you've only just had it done, that come 15th of May 2025, it'll be still under a year old. So yeah, it should still be. Yeah. After that, you can just continue to do the other ones that are relevant to your croft. So your biodiversity audit and your carbon audit probably are the next two.
That's great, thanks.
I guess as well, you want to just check that field that you've done is a Region 1 field that you would maybe apply fertiliser to. It depends how much Region 1 ground you've got and how many fields.
Yeah, I did 4 fields this year because I'm back to an old croft of my parents, and so I was kind of starting from scratch. So I did all 4 fields.
And are you applying fertiliser or inputs to those fields?
Fertilisers for the first year this year.
What meets the criteria?
Grand.
Interested to hear your feedback on this meeting, but like I said at the start, really keen to have feedback on how you get on with completing the plans and audits too. And I'm sure Iain be keen to hear about that too, because this is just the first year of this. This is just the start, and need to see how this is going to develop over time and how it's going to change as we head towards 2028 and all that other wider policy reform that's coming down the line too. And if, I suppose, since we've got a few minutes left, if anybody wants to make any wider points beyond just the whole farm plan, anything that you want to flag to SCF in terms of the ag policy reform, or any questions, what would you like future workshops on, I suppose? What would recommendations be on historical payments? I wonder if this is talking about entitlements. Is that something that people should be transferring or selling at the moment? What do the advisors think on that one?
I think that would be a personal choice.
Very personal, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe in a situation where somebody is not wanting to carry on, in terms of the whole farm plan has put them off, and tonight's meeting has put them off completely. Hopefully not, but maybe in that situation they may think about transferring entitlements to a neighbour or a family member and let them claim them, and they don't have a claim at all. So yeah, I think, but other than that, I think it's very much a personal, and it probably just depends on each personal situation, I would say, Donald.
Andrew, got your hand up there.
Yeah, it's a question that's maybe a bit kind of off subject here, but I've got an application in for a CAGS, and it's taking weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Has it been halted? Does anybody know? To hear back whether it's been approved or not approved, and it's someone else is the same. And I just wondered, has their funding been halted or something? Do you know?
There had been a pause some time ago now, but my understanding was that things were back underway.
Yeah, if you want to or somebody get his email address or details or pass on my email, more than happy for you to email myself, Andrew, and I can take it offline and have a look at things, or chase up your local office. Which office is your local area office? Do you know?
Golspie.
Okay. Yeah, just if I can just give you my email address, and if you want to send me an email, then that's not a problem. I'll take it up with.
A few questions in the chat there. Sheena's asking, what would you do as a new crofter? So, just purchasing cows just now. So Sheena, will you be planning to put in a single application form in 2025? Do you think? Do you want to come in?
Hello. Yeah, I'm hoping to. I'm just trying to learn about it as much as I can, obviously, just now. And my mother's had a croft and been crofting for years and years, but because of this change with the new plans and everything like that, then some of the information she has isn't necessarily as transferable, you know. So I'm trying to do it myself, well, with her, but like starting myself, and I'm just working it out just now. So we've got a couple of cows that I think will be transferred to myself, and then me and my brother are looking at buying some more. But it's just working out for the animal plan and everything like that. Then do I do it, because if I'm only purchasing them over the next 6 months or something, then do I submit that as if I've had them, like the history of it, I suppose.
So
Iain?
if I can just jump in, Donald. So first thing I would say is, you know, if you need to get basic payment entitlement. So if I don't know if your mum claims subsidy in the past or does it. So is she going to continue claiming, or are you going to start claiming as a new business? And it's that whether you need to register to get your own entitlements through the National Reserve, you know, or do something like that. And then you can decide. So then, yeah, the Animal Health and Welfare Plan would be one of the options you could look at, because it's that plan of what you're going to do for animal health in the next 12 months. So yeah, that would be one of the ones you could look.
Does that answer your question, Sheena? All right.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
Another question's popping up in the chat there from Elizabeth Allen. If anything changes, i.e. new line of stock introduced during the 5 years, can it be amended easily? Is that related to the Animal Health and Welfare Plan? So you'd be updating that every year. So if you added cattle to your holding, then you'd have to update your Animal Health and Welfare Plan. So
no, we've got cows at the moment, and I did have sheep, but Mum and Dad were ill, and we got rid of all our sheep. Stress and all the rest of it. And now I'm looking to maybe reintroduce the sheep in the future. So, you know, if we do the plan before I do that, is it easy to kind of, and they'll be updated?
You would just have to keep that updated, I think, and
that's just
related to your holding every year. Just make sure that Animal Health and Welfare Plan relates to what's on your holding in that time 12-month period.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Iain, anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's it. And you know, so likes your carbon audit, it could change, or your carbon footprint could change after 12 months of having sheep. If you've only had when you did your carbon audit, if you only had cows, and you know, so that 12 months. But what, you know, we're going to provide more guidance on how we go forward with changes in situation between two audits, so to speak. But like so if you took on additional land, you might need to update your habitat biodiversity audit if there's more parent land taken on during the 5 years. But it's something that we're working on for the next round of guidance updates.
Okay, thank you. That's excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, that's us up to time now. Hopefully we managed to answer your questions. If I didn't communicate your question as you wanted it to, or if we didn't cover something that you wanted to pick up on, then please just drop us an email and we'll try our best to get an answer to you and give us some feedback on the event, how you thought it went, what you want us to do in the future. And yeah, like I said, keep us posted on how you get on with doing these audits and plans. We're really keen to hear how crofters are actually getting on with doing this, with negotiating the new system, and you know, we're here to help and support you, but also to make sure that we're telling Iain and his team what they need to be picking up on, what they need to be changing in the system, what crofters are actually experiencing on the ground. And we can only do that if we hear from you. So please just get in touch with us if you have any issues. It doesn't matter how small you think it might be. It's really important that we get that information. Just thank you very much to our panelists for giving us your time tonight and for answering all the questions so thoroughly and well. It was good. Right.
Thanks very much. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Thanks all.